Let's have a look at what's making news in print and online this morning. And we're joined by Research Fellow at Deakin University and rural podcaster Kirsten Duprose from Carramut in Western Victoria. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Lisa and Michael. Nice to be here.
Yeah, well, let's head to the next stage of the decision-making in the Northern Territory in regards to the alcohol bans.
That's right. It's gone through Parliament essentially in the NT. So the laws reinstating community and alcohol bans have passed in the Northern Territory Parliament. So this is making news on ABC Online in a big way and also on the front page of the NT News this morning. So it passed only hours after it was introduced in Parliament, and the bans are expected to take effect by the end of this week. So this means that takeaway alcohol is again prohibited in Aboriginal town camps or remote communities that were made dry as part of the 2007 intervention. Now, the interesting part is that communities will be able to apply to change or exit the restrictions if a majority of residents agree, and that's 60% is considered a majority, on a plan that is then approved by the government. Now, this all comes after that frenzied media debate. Some commentators have called it a moral panic, where crime in Alice Springs was really making the news headlines, and that's after the NT Labor government allowed for the previous law to lapse, banning alcohol, saying it was racist and ineffective. Now, then there was a snap review, of course, commissioned by the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. And look, while the federal government has certainly acknowledged that this goes well beyond a problem of alcohol, that it's a lack of employment services, it's intergenerational disadvantage and a lack of educational opportunity that's the root cause. This recent alcohol ban really goes against the federal government's messaging about the Indigenous voices to Parliament, which is really about listening, of course, to Indigenous voices, including young Indigenous voices. So the very act of enacting this legislation becomes problematic, I think, in this context. Now, the NT government says that this latest alcohol ban is a circuit breaker and that they're implementing temporary dry zones only until communities can develop alcohol management plans. But of course, this is being criticised by some Indigenous groups who say, this should have happened before the ban was lapsed in the first place, and that 60% majority for these alcohol management plans is a problem in terms of Indigenous decision-making, that having this arbitrary figure and a 60% vote doesn't really match Indigenous decision-making. So I think while this legislation has passed, there's going to be a lot more discussion about this as time goes on.
Indeed, there will be, Kirsten. Now, we've talked a lot about Australia Post in recent weeks and how much money, truckloads of money it's losing on its letter delivery business. Now we have our homepage as a story on how Australia Post may confront these losses.
That's right. I think this is an indication story, a story of what could come. I think this could be a front page news story in perhaps the not too distant future. So Australia Post Chief Executive Paul Green has told Federal Parliament that changes really need to be made to its business model because the letters arm of its business lost nearly $200 million in just 6 months. And under legislation, Australia Post is required to deliver to Australian households 5 days a week. And we did see some of those rules suspended, though, during the pandemic. And I remember at the time there was discussion that, is this actually going to become permanent? But Paul Green told a Senate estimates hearing yesterday that the letters business is in an unstoppable decline, and that as volumes continue to fall, then of course the costs are increasing. Now, according to AusPost, the average household's only receiving about one letter per week, and most of this is the corporate stuff, like your bank bills and statements. So while the parcel business is certainly booming, it boomed under COVID and it's really held, there's this kind of two business model where one's going really bad, the letters, and the post office, the parcel side is going really, really well. But again, you can't, there's even discussion about relying on that as, crowd sourcing or, new corporate environments where you could potentially just be able to use your boot to deliver things. How long will AusPost hold on to the parcel business. And I just wanted to make the comment as well that Australia Post is really important in a regional and rural context. You know, you often find AusPost in just the back of, your general store, and it's done for getting money out. A lot of people pay bills, people who don't have the internet, they still use AusPost. So it's a really vital service, and particularly as we see banks withdrawing from regional and rural communities really rapidly, I think, it's important to remember how important Australia Post is, but at the same time, how it looks in the future is probably going to have to change.
Yeah, I know that figure, 98% of everything that gets sent is actually bills or official documents. 2% are the birthday cards. Hey, let's finish up with something close to your heart as a rural podcaster. That's the future of the sheep export bans.
Yeah, and again, this is probably another sort of indication story, and it was really making headlines in the agricultural news media. So this is from Farm Online. And the Agriculture Minister, Murray Watt, has spoken at a Senate Estimates Committee late yesterday, saying that, while he recognises that there have been improvements in animal welfare for the live sheep exports, particularly when you look at mortality rates, he has repeated his government's commitment to phasing out live sheep exports. And I think the key statement that he's made is that he said, unfortunately for the industry, I think they've lost their social licence because of a range of incidents. So the number of live sheep exports has actually dropped quite a lot. It was about 1.9 million in 2018, and now it's around 500,000. And the federal government has previously said that it wouldn't start the phase out to its next term, or certainly not in this term of Parliament. So the live industry is clearly going to be disappointed by this. They have been working quite hard to, meet reporting requirements, animal health standards. They have vets on board, all of that sort of thing. But I think this is a really interesting conversation that the agriculture industry needs to have around social licence. And, the fact that the minister has said it's lost social licence. Something like social licence is quite a nebulous concept, but we're hearing it more and more, and it sometimes cannot be met by pure data reporting. And I think agriculture, it's both a science and a practice. And I see this all the time. Ag loves its data and it loves measurements, but sometimes there are concepts like social licence which go beyond that side of things. And so I think that this one is a bit of a cautionary tale for social licence and where we're going, particularly on issues like animal welfare and environmental sustainability.
De Prose, it is always good to have your insight, especially on those issues. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.